A fun slate of games coming up at 1 o'clock on CBS on Sunday for week number 6. You got the Patriots and Browns, the Ramondre Stevenson game, Jaguars at Colts, hopefully the Jonathan Taylor game, Bengals at Saints, revenge game maybe for Andy Dalton and the Ravens at the Giants. Just wanted to see if the Giants can keep it going and maybe get to 5-1 and make our buddy Adam Mazer very happy. So we'll talk about these games right now. We'll start with that game in East Rutherford, New Jersey, between the Giants and the Ravens. I know Adam's very excited about that one. So what we like to do with these game previews, you'll see with the graphics, like to give you an injury that we're keeping an eye on, or several injuries that we're keeping an eye on, give you a start-sit play in those games, a DFS play, and a prop to play based on the odds on Caesar Sportsbook. So the injuries that we're looking at here for the Ravens are Rashad Bateman, Kadarius Toney, every Giants wide receiver basically, including Phil McConkey. So they're just really banged up at the receiving core there. We might get some good news, though, with Wan'Dale Robinson coming back. So the starter-sit play here is Devin Duvernay, without Rashad Bateman expected to play. Darius Slayton is the DFS play, and the prop to play is Daniel Jones over 36.5 rushing yards at -106. But let's talk about a different story as opposed to what we see here. And Dave, I'll ask you this about J.K. Dobbins, because he's been a frustrating fantasy option. 2 games ago, he was awesome, scored the 2 touchdowns, had 4 catches. Then we come back last week, and he didn't play as much as I think we would have liked. We saw a little bit too much of Kenyon Drake. A little bit too much even of Mike Davis. So is this a good week to buy into J.K. Dobbins against the Giants defense that may get Leonard Williams back on the other side?
If you like matchups, it's a good week. If you're worried about how much he's going to touch the ball, it's going to be bad until that eventually changes. And I think that Dobbins is trending in the right direction. Loved his balance last week. He had a run that was a 2-yard loss. He turned it into a 12-yard gain. But he's not showing that explosiveness, and he's not getting the type of opportunities. He didn't even play in the fourth quarter last week. So I'm a little nervous about just how much upside he has. It feels like he needs a touchdown in order to be good for fantasy. That makes him a low-end number 2 fantasy running back.
Use him in the passing game as well. That was fun to see, the 4 catches. That's what I was hoping for last week. But again, unfortunately, did not happen against the Bengals. Adam, Devin Duvernay with the opportunity without Rashad Bateman, again, assuming he's going to be out. Last week we saw 7 targets, 3 carries. They were using him kind of like what we saw. I think you mentioned Deebo Samuel. Can this be a good opportunity for him to once again be successful as a potential starter against the Giants when it comes to fantasy managers?
Yeah, they're going to be trailing by 2 or 3 touchdowns in this game, probably pretty early. I like Devin Duvernay. I like him a lot. He scored 9.1 or more PPR fantasy points in 4 of 5 games, but has been over 13 points only once. And you look at the Giants, they've given up the 3rd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but I don't really consider it a tough matchup. CeeDee Lamb had a huge game, and he had that big drop. Darnell Mooney, Randall Cobb over 90 yards. Allen Lazard scored a touchdown. So they can certainly be beat, and this is the only wide receiver. It's just going to be Andrews and Duvernay, the only wide receiver that Lamar Jackson is throwing to. I think he's got a nice floor of about 10 to 12 PPR fantasy points. If he scores, it gives you a really big game, so he's a number 3 receiver with number 2 potential.
Did have 3 touchdowns through the first 3 weeks of the season as well, but that was with Rashad Bateman playing, so we'll see if he can get back into the end zone there. And then, Adam, when you look at the Giants receiving core here, so again, Brian Daboll said on Friday that there is optimism around Wan'Dale Robinson making his debut. He made the trip to London last week but did not play. Toney not going to go, Galladay not going to go. So Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, maybe Richie James still. Is there any Giants receiver you look at and say, okay, maybe a number 3 receiver in this matchup against what has been a bad secondary so far?
Well, I think the secondary has been better than people give it credit for, because it was really just that Dolphins game where they were embarrassing. They've been a lot better since then, but they are losing their starting safety, Marcus Williams, for a foreseeable future. So I don't love the matchup. And no, I'm not interested in anything other than stashing Wan'Dale Robinson. He's available in almost 90% of CBS Sports leagues, and I think you definitely don't want to start him this week, and I wouldn't go to Darius Slayton. He's just too up and down. He played about 55% of the snaps last week. So I think Wan'Dale Robinson is the guy to have, not to start, but to stash. And I do think he's a pretty good stash. I think he should probably be rostered in about 30% of CBS Sports leagues, and right now it's somewhere around 10%.
Yeah, not even 10%. It's just been, people not ready to buy into it, understandably so, but this could be the start of something for him. I do think, though, for Slayton, if they are going to be chasing points on the other side, depending on how you're looking at it, that we saw last week against the Packers, he stepped up 7 targets, 6 catches, so maybe he's the guy that Daniel Jones is going to start to lean on. Let's go now to our next game here. We got the Bengals and the Saints. This one is yours, Dave, and so the injuries that we're looking at here, again, T. Higgins, we'll find out what his status is. The Saints, just everybody. Jameis Winston, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry. We'll find out what the status is of those guys. Jameis could actually return, so we'll see what happens there. The start-sit play is Hayden Hurst. He's also a little bit banged up, but is expected to go despite the groin injury. You also have Hayden Hurst as the DFS play. very reasonably priced on DraftKings and FanDuel. And the prop to play is Will Lutz. Always love the kicker props. Over 1.5 field goals at plus 108.
That one's a lock, by the way.
It should be, hopefully. The Saints have struggled. The Bengals are number 2 in fantasy points allowed to opposing kickers. There's your kicker fantasy news for the day. Joe Burrow, it's been a little struggle for him. Adam alluded to this, how teams are playing them with the 2 cover high safeties, taking away the deep ball. Is this going to be a good matchup for him, especially if Higgins does not go or is less than 100?
I mean, without Higgins, I think you can take away the high upside for Burrow. I think he's going to be right in that range between 20 and let's call it 24 fantasy points. But I think that's a safe bet that he gets between 20 and 24. And that's with Chase, that's with Hurst, that's with Tyler Boyd. We've talked a lot about him. And that's with the running backs also helping out and catching some passes. Maybe one of them scores on a catch from Joe Burrow. So I don't mind him this week as a starter.
Adam, let's play out the scenario of the Saints not having any of their healthy wide receivers. No Michael Thomas, no Chris Olave, no Jarvis Landry. We saw last week that they didn't really need those guys. Again, Olave did score a touchdown, but it was the Taysom Hill show. And everybody's excited about Taysom Hill because you could play him at tight end. He doesn't really play the position that way. Where does Taysom Hill fall in for you? Is he a must-start play, even if it's a flex, knowing that he has that multiple touchdown potential?
As a flex, I would say no. I would only want to start him as a tight end. And looking at these consensus rankings here, I would start him over Evan Ingram. And if Higgins plays, I would start him over Hayden Hurst. You know what? I would rank him 9th. I'd rank him 8th because I would move Gerald Everett down and I would put him behind George Kittle. I would put him ahead of Kyle Pitts. I think he's going to be a big part of the game plan. I think they have no choice but to make him a big part of the game plan. As of right now, I'm sort of expecting no Michael Thomas and hopeful for Chris Olave, but he's their goal line running back and he's a weapon. He's a legit weapon. So I'm going to put him in there, even in a PPR league.
Yeah, the catches are going to be, I think, what sways it. Was he only has 1 on the season, so that's not something you can count on. It's the touchdowns really that matter. If he scores, then you'll be great, and if he doesn't, you're going to be very, very disappointed. But he has now scored in 3 of the 4 games that he's appeared in, so hopefully they continue to get him touches and get him into the end zone once again.